Number 8. Brian VERNA. A fight over a debt ended in the death of a 29-year-old man in the Argentinian port city of Bahia Blanca on June the 13th of 2022. Brian VERNA worked for the city's park department alongside his grandfather, 77-year-old Domingo, to whom he reportedly owed money. The dispute culminated outside the latter's residence, where surveillance cameras captured Brian charging at his grandfather while his girlfriend, Aldana Soria, was dragged to the ground and clinging to his legs. In an attempt to stop him, the younger VERNA swung a broomstick and repeatedly punched the other man before Soria was eventually able to restrain him. The footage showed VERNA when he returned a few hours later and started kicking his grandfather's door. Domingo then slightly opened the door and emptied the barrel of a revolver into Brian's body. He was sent tumbling over a row of plants after being shot in the cheek, neck, shoulder, chest, and abdomen, resulting in fatal injuries. Domingo appeared before a magistrate and was granted release from prison after the court had taken into account the penalty provided by law for this crime and the advanced age of the accused. Domingo's daughter, who was the deceased's mother, claimed that her son suffered from mental illness since childhood and had recently stopped taking his pills. She also described her father as an abuser who'd beaten her while she was pregnant and who'd been stalking and harassing Brian over the debt. Number 7. GRETTA VEDLER. Roughly a month after making a social media post targeting President Vladimir Putin, a 23-year-old Russian model went missing. In January of 2021, GRETTA VEDLER inferred that the state leader was a psychopath, predicting that his campaign to improve Russia's integrity would end in tragedy, foreshadowing the events in Ukraine. There were initial concerns that the 23-year-old's decision to speak out against the regime's policies was connected to her disappearance. However, over a year later, in the spring of 2022, her boyfriend confessed to killing her. Dmitry Korovin, who was also in his early 20s, claimed that he and Vedler had argued over money at a hotel in Moscow. The man struggled with drug addiction and would often borrow money from Vedler, who reportedly worked as an escort, without paying her back. The row violently escalated to the point that the intoxicated Korovin strangled the model to death. For 3 nights he slept in the same room with the corpse before stuffing it in a newly bought suitcase. Korovin then drove 300 miles to the Lipetsk region and abandoned Vedler's remains in the trunk of a car in the garage of his parents' home. He kept posting to her social media to maintain the illusion that she was still alive, but was eventually discovered. Footage later emerged of Vedler predicting her grisly fate. Prior to the murder, she'd recorded herself in the hotel, naming Korovin as her future killer. The model mentioned in the recording that even though she'd been screaming and was threatened with murder, no one had intervened to help her. Number 6. Chloe Palmer. On November the 24th of 2017, English teenager Kristalla Amphlett was the designated driver in a group of 4 that had gone on a girls' night out in Watford. They'd left one of the town's clubs at around 3:30 a.m. and headed north along the M1 towards St Albans. Amphlett then started arguing over petrol money with passenger Maisie O'Flynn, who sat in the back seat of her Renault Twingo next to 19-year-old Chloe Palmer. As tensions escalated, Amphlett became angry at the other women and pulled the car over on the hard shoulder of the M1, reportedly without any illumination or hazard lights flashing. She switched the engine off, opened her door, and turned with her legs hanging out of the car as she continued bickering with O'Flynn. Keziah Knight, who'd been sitting in the front passenger seat, got out and leaned on a metal safety barrier. As the women continued arguing, an Isuzu D-Map plowed into the back of the Renault. Amphlett and O'Flynn both suffered serious injuries, but ultimately survived. Palmer was left with a pulmonary contusion, a complex pelvic fracture, a broken left leg, and an acute brain injury. She succumbed to complications stemming from the latter after 6 days in the hospital. During the legal proceedings that followed, the driver of the Isuzu, whom evidence indicated had fallen asleep behind the wheel, admitted causing death by dangerous driving and was jailed for 30 months. Amphlett was also considered to have been responsible for her friend's death, Due to her decision to pull the car over under unsafe circumstances, she however pleaded not guilty to causing death and injury by dangerous driving and was ultimately cleared. Number 5. Kevin Tucker. The body of 38-year-old Kevin Tucker was found in the shower of the Grand Motel on South Halsted Street, Chicago, in March of 2019. The man was naked and unresponsive, with water raining down on him while the television was blaring. He succumbed to a bullet wound to the torso. Roughly 45 minutes before the authorities were alerted to reports of gunshot, Tucker was captured by surveillance systems, checking into a room with 28-year-old Katara Chanel. The police would later determine that Chanel, Tucker's on-again, off-again girlfriend, had lured him to the motel while under the belief that he'd recently come into a large sum of money. Chanel was allegedly enraged that the man hadn't given her a cut and was captured on video running from the room after the gunshot had been heard. The woman then called someone to pick her up and was dropped off in the Little Village neighborhood, reportedly telling the driver that they could keep her car because she was fleeing the state. An arrest warrant was issued in early July, and the woman was ultimately taken into custody on charges of first-degree murder, facing a sentence of life in prison if found guilty. Number 4. Wendy Lynn Wien. Michigan woman Wendy Lynn Wien was given a sentence of 7 to 20 years in prison in January of 2022 after she admitted trying to have her ex-husband killed over a money dispute. On July the 17th of 2020, Wien, then in her early 50s, had accessed a website called Rent a Hitman. It was a fake website created by California man Bob Innes in the mid-2000s as a class project. He abandoned the site for a few years but then returned to find numerous hit requests, including Wien's. She'd adopted a pseudonym when trying to solicit her ex's murder, but used her real information at the end of the service request. The woman believed she'd entered communication with potential assassin Guido Fanelli, but instead she was giving her information to Innes, who alerted Michigan State Police. An undercover agent then pretended to be from Rent a Hitman and arranged a meeting with Wien. The woman agreed to pay $5,000 for the hit, also providing the detective with her ex's home address, work address, and phone number. Wien was arrested after a second meeting later in the day, during which she gave the undercover agent a $200 down payment. Later on, she pleaded guilty to solicitation of murder and using a computer to commit a crime.
If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below, or follow us on Instagram and reach out to us there.
Number 3. Loretta Saunders. In January of 2014, couple Blake Leggett and Victoria Henneberry, both in their late 20s, moved to Halifax, Canada and sublet a room in an apartment leased by university student Loretta Saunders. The couple ran into financial difficulties soon after the move. On February the 13th, Saunders went to collect the rent from them, but Leggett and Henneberry claimed they didn't have the money. The latter lied by saying that she'd lost her card and needed to contact her bank. 26-year-old Saunders remained on the couch as Leggett crept behind her. He placed a plastic bag over the young woman's head, attempting to suffocate her. She fought back and managed to tear through the plastic before she and her aggressor ended up on the floor of the dining room. Leggett then slammed Saunders' head into the floor until she stopped moving. He then wrapped her head in plastic, placed her body in a hockey bag, and fled Nova Scotia with Henneberry. They drove the victim's car and used her bank card to buy supplies for the trip. Henneberry also pretended to be Saunders while trying to get a password from her boyfriend, with one of the texts reading, "I'm so stressed that I can't even remember my own mother's maiden name." The couple stopped the car during a snowfall and hid the body in a wooded area adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway near Salisbury. Within 5 days of the killing, they were arrested in Harrow, Ontario, while they were still in Saunders' car and also in possession of her ID, phone and bank card. In 2015, Leggett pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and Henneberry pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Applause echoed throughout a Halifax courtroom as both were sentenced to life in prison, with a parole available after 25 and 10 years respectively. Number 2. Robert Mitchell Williams. In late October of 2019, a man was gunned down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, following a money dispute with his cousin. Roughly half an hour after midnight, on October the 29th, law enforcement arrived at Monish Park at 15th Street and Black Bears Way. They found the victim, 36-year-old Rayshard Ritchie, with multiple gunshot injuries and rushed him to DCH Regional Medical Center, where he ultimately passed away. The shooter, identified as 40-year-old Robert Mitchell Williams, was taken into custody by the Tuscaloosa Violent Crimes Unit, with his bond set at $150,000. His initial charge of attempted murder was upgraded following Ritchie's death, and the authorities reported that he had prior convictions for second-degree assault and robbery. The details of the violent incident, including the amount of money over which the men had been feuding, weren't disclosed in the immediate aftermath. Number 1. Paula and Dawn. In the summer of 2021, Las Vegas man Arnaldo Lozano Sanchez was feuding with his tenants over unpaid rent and told a neighbor that he wanted to avoid the eviction process and handle it his way. He went inside the single-story pink house that he owned and started to indiscriminately gun down his renters. Witness Carlos Lopez claimed that he and his girlfriend Paula were staying in one of the rooms, which the woman had left shortly before the shooting started. After Lopez heard gunfire, he opened the door and saw Lozano Sanchez standing in the hallway, smiling and laughing. He then told another of the renters, Seferino Reyes, that he couldn't run from him anymore and forced his way into the room that he'd rented with his girlfriend Dawn. She was shot and killed, while Reyes was shot 9 times, but survived. Lopez, who wasn't injured in the landlord's rampage, started running from the house, at which point he found his girlfriend bleeding in the driveway from gunshot injuries that ultimately proved fatal. Lozano Sanchez was arrested, but refused to talk to detectives asking for an attorney, and, as of the latest updates, he was denied bail and awaited a trial date. Thanks for watching. Would you rather owe money to an aggressive loan shark or face a bull shark in open water? Let us know in the comments section below.